And our excellent leaders on this Friday morning. Let's greet now Bob Gunning and from Morocco.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning, listeners, on a beautiful Friday morning. This is Bob Godding reading the Omaha World Herald today.
And I'm Ralph Morocco with the Lincoln Journal-Star. We'll begin today's program with news from Baswaya, Iraq. Holding white flags and traveling in convoys of dump trucks, army buses, and family sedans, thousands of residents poured out of eastern neighborhoods of Mosul on Thursday, the first significant wave of people to escape the city held by the Islamic State. More than 1.2 million people are believed to be still trapped in the northern city, which Iraqi security forces are just beginning to penetrate after launching an offensive to retake it 2 weeks ago. Newly constructed camps in the area have capacity for just 60,000 people. The stream of humanity, which includes shepherds pushing herds of sheep out of the war zone, crawled along in heavy traffic leaving Mosul and headed toward a swelling camp of displaced persons erected on the banks of the Kazir River, which has space for 1,000 families but is rapidly filling up. Even as they fled, some were almost giddy with relief. Drivers in the convoys blasted their horns and waved V for victory as Iraqi and Kurdish troops passed by on their way to the front lines. Girls and young women who were forced to wear black veils over their faces in Mosul took them off and let the wind blow through their hair. For nearly 2.5 years, they have lived under Islamic State's brutal rule in the group's de facto capital in Iraq. It was the city's central mosque that the group's leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, declared his caliphate 2 years ago, calling on the world's Muslims to follow him. Now, Iraqi commanders say it's just a matter of time before the city is recaptured, though no one is sure of the cost civilians trapped inside may pay. As government troops closed in, Baghdadi rallied his followers on Thursday, releasing an audio recording that called on them to remain steadfast and fight and obey their commanders. "O you who seek martyrdom, start your actions," Baghdadi said in a translation provided by the Site Intelligence Group. "Totally decimate their territories and make their blood flow like rivers." Analysts said it was the first time the Islamic State leader, whose whereabouts are unknown, had personally called on his fighters to maintain discipline on the battlefield, suggesting he may be concerned about defections. Some Iraqi commanders have said the Islamic State fighters and their families have moved from the eastern side of Mosul to the west and even to Syria, although such reports are difficult to verify. The number of civilians fleeing increased significantly on Thursday as fighting crossed from villages more densely populated neighborhoods on the outskirts of the city, said Alvid Strom from the Norwegian Refugee Council. She said at least 1,000 families had fled, but new arrivals were still being counted.
The chairman of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe of South Dakota has called for the removal of the head of the Omaha district of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for allegedly insensitive remarks in a phone conversation this week. Chairman Harold Frazier, in a letter dated Wednesday, accused Colonel John Henderson, the Omaha District Chief Engineer, of completely unprofessional, insulting, and perhaps illegal conduct during the conversation. Frazier said he had called Henderson following a clash between protesters and law enforcement officials on Wednesday over the Dakota Access several miles north of the Cheyenne River Reservation in North Dakota. Frazier said he called to question why county and state law enforcement agencies, including a small group of Nebraska state troopers, had begun pepper spraying and arresting protesters for trespassing Wednesday when they were conducting peaceful demonstrations on publicly owned Corps lands. The tribal chairman said that instead of addressing the question, Henderson accused the tribal members of building a bridge over a small stream in violation of Corps rules and of stealing or mutilating a rancher's buffalo near the protest site, which is just north of the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation. The Cheyenne River Reservation is just south of Standing Rock. Both border the Missouri River. Frazier, in his letter, said that the protesters may or may not be Native Americans, much less members of his tribe. He claimed that the comments by Henderson had racist undertones. A spokesman for the Corps in Omaha, Al Barras, said he had read the letter, but the agency was not ready to respond on Thursday. Barras said the Corps has requested the removal of the bridge, which was built without the proper permits. The Corps, he said, has allowed protesters to establish camps in some areas, but has asked the Morton County, North Dakota Sheriff's Office, the lead law enforcement agency in the protest area, to prevent the establishment of any new camps on Corps lands. For several months, protesters have been camping along the Missouri south of Bismarck in an effort to halt completion of the $3.8 billion Dakota Access Pipeline. The 1,200-mile pipeline cuts across Iowa and designed to carry crude oil from North Dakota's Bakken oil fields to a refinery in Illinois. Opponent says it crosses tribal cultural sites and threatens the drinking water supplies of the reservation south of where it crosses the Missouri, while its supporters say it's a vital improvement in infrastructure that will carry the oil more safely and at a lower cost. On Wednesday, law enforcement officers used pepper spray to stop protesters from crossing a stream and entering land owned by the pipeline company. 2 people were arrested. Last week, more than 140 protesters were arrested as law enforcement worked to clear a camp on private land on the pipeline route. Last month, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe sued the Corps, contending that the environmental review of the project was inadequate. And in a related story, hundreds of clergy of various faiths joined protests Thursday against the Dakota Access Oil Pipeline in southern North Dakota, singing hymns, marching, and ceremonially burning a copy of a 600-year-old document. More than 500 clergy from around the world gathered with protesters at a campfire at the main protest camp to burn a copy of a religious document from the 1400s sanctioning the taking of land from indigenous peoples. Later Thursday, 14 protesters were arrested in the judicial wing of the state capitol in Bismarck. Highway Patrol Lieutenant Tom Iverson said they faced disorderly conduct charges for refusing to leave the building.
Even as the electoral map shows new signs of volatility, a surge in early voting by Latinos is bolstering Hillary Clinton's prospects in battleground states, including Arizona, Florida, and Nevada, in the closing days of a tightened race against Donald Trump. Fresh election data suggests that the Democratic nominee appears to be benefiting from upticks in participation by Latinos, who historically vote in lower numbers than the electorate overall. The trend, say advocates seeking to expand the Hispanic electorate, is largely motivated by distaste from Trump, who has proposed hardline immigration policies and stirred emotions from the outset of his campaign, with a series of controversial statements about Mexicans and other Latinos. The Trump candidacy and the climate it's created has really heightened the importance and the personal nature of this election for Latinos, said Yvonne Cancela, of Culinary Workers Union 226, which represents casino workers in Nevada. According to the data firm Catalyst, among the largest increases of early voting by Latinos is taking place in Arizona, a traditionally Republican state that Clinton visited for the first time during the general election on Wednesday. Her running mate, Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, delivered a speech there on Thursday entirely in Spanish. With Latinos accounting for about half of its 57,000 members, the Culinary Union in Nevada has launched an unprecedented door-knocking and phoning effort to urge members and their neighbors cast their votes early. In Florida, more Latinos had voted early as of Wednesday than did so during the entire early voting period in 2012, according to the Clinton campaign. Some of the biggest registration gains there have come along the I-4 corridor, which has witnessed a big influx of Puerto Ricans since in the wake of the island's economic difficulties. More modest increases in Latino participation, meanwhile, are being seen in battleground states, including Colorado and Virginia, where most polls show Clinton with a shrinking lead over Trump. In Texas, a red state where Trump maintains a lead in polling, counties with the highest share of Latino voters, all located along the Mexican border, have also seen surges in early voting. according to the Office of the Secretary of State. Among Hispanics, Clinton maintained roughly a 50 percentage point lead in a new Washington Post Univision News poll released Thursday. At the same time, early voting among African Americans, another key part of the constituency Clinton is counting upon to prevail until recent days, had been lagging voter participation from 4 years ago. Clinton sought to shore up support among Black voters during a pair of appearances in North Carolina on Thursday, in which she argued that Trump's vision for his presidency would leave them behind. He has spent his entire campaign offering a dog whistle to his most hateful supporters, Clinton told a crowd of about 1,800 on the grounds of Pitt Community College. He retweets white supremacists and spreads racially tinged conspiracy theories. Clinton noted that Trump has been repeatedly accused of housing discrimination at his real estate properties, and that he repeatedly proclaimed the guilt of 5 Black and Hispanic men known as the Central Park Five on assault and rape accusations, even after DNA evidence exonerated them. Do any of us have a place in Trump's America? Clinton asked. Republicans pointed to some favorable trends in absentee and early voting numbers for their standard bearer, including upticks in GOP participation in counties in Ohio that Mitt Romney, the party's 2012 nominee, carried. Ohio, which has a large white working class population, is among the swing states where Trump has shown the most appeal. As the races tighten nationally, Trump has sought to put several Democratic-leaning states in play that share similar demographics, including Wisconsin and Michigan, which figure prominently in his schedule in the race's closing days. His campaign has also been buoyed by tightening poll numbers in New Hampshire, a largely white state that Clinton until recently appeared to have locked down. On Thursday, Trump also appeared in North Carolina, a state key to his political fortunes. In Concord, North Carolina, Trump cast Clinton as a candidate of yesterday and complained that he is held to a different standard than his Democratic rival. At his rally, Trump continued to draw attention to the FBI's renewed inquiry into Clinton's email practices while she was Secretary of State, when she used a private server. Now she's got a bigger problem. If she were to win, it would create an unprecedented constitutional crisis that would cripple the operations of our government, Trump said. The GOP nominee also criticized now interim Democratic National Committee Chairwoman Donna Brazile after an email released by the anti-secrecy website WikiLeaks indicated that she had provided debate questions in advance to the Clinton campaign. Trump said that if he had done something similar, he would have faced a bigger backlash. Headlines: Trump to leave race, Trump said, opining about what the media reaction would have been had that happened. Clinton's off-changing travel schedule, as well as the lack of announced campaign travel for much of the weekend and Monday, provides clues to the day-by-day, hour-by-hour evaluation of the campaign map. Her campaign is balancing a need to solidify support in Colorado, New Hampshire, and Michigan with efforts to counter Trump's momentum in Florida and North Carolina. Bill Clinton made a sudden detour to Detroit on Thursday for outreach aimed at Black voters, also a sign of where the campaign sees potential signs of trouble. Hillary Clinton will be there Friday.
From London, Britain's plans to leave the European Union hit a large speed bump Thursday when the High Court ruled that the government can't start exit negotiations without a vote in Parliament. The judgment deepened Britain's divide over Europe, raising hopes among pro-EU politicians that they can soften the terms of the UK's withdrawal from the bloc. Leave, campaigners say, any attempt to do that would be a betrayal of voters' decisions. The government immediately said it would ask the Supreme Court to overturn the ruling. The court has set aside time in early December to hear the case. Thursday's ruling could delay government plans to start talks on Britain's EU exit or Brexit within weeks and opens a major constitutional battle over the balance of power between Parliament and the government. Brexit Secretary David Davis said Britain's June 23 vote to leave the EU must be respected. The people want us to get on with it, and that is what we are going to do, he said. Prime Minister Theresa May has said she will use century-old powers known as royal prerogative to invoke Article 50 of the EU treaty, which launches 2 years of exit negotiations by the end of March. The powers, traditionally held by the monarch but now used by politicians, enable decisions about international treaties and other issues to be made without a vote in Parliament. Several claimants, including a hairdresser and an entrepreneur, challenged May's right to act. They argued that leaving the EU will remove rights, including free movement within the bloc, and that it couldn't be done without Parliament's approval. 3 senior judges agreed, ruling that the government does not have the power under the Crown's prerogative to give notice pursuant to Article 50 for the UK to withdraw from the European Union. The judges backed the claimants' arguments that the government could not remove Britain's legal rights unless Parliament had conferred upon the Crown authority to do so. The ruling infuriated pro-Brexit campaigners who see the lawsuit as an attempt to block or delay Britain's EU exit. UK Independence Party leader Nigel Farage, who helped lead the campaign to leave the EU, tweeted, "I worry that a betrayal may be near at hand. I now fear that every attempt will be made to block or delay the triggering of Article 50, Farage said. If this is so, they have no idea of the level of public anger they will provoke. It's unlikely that the ruling will stop Britain from eventually leaving the EU. Most lawmakers accept that voters' decision must be respected, but they differ widely on what form Brexit should take and how close a relationship Britain should keep with the EU. A majority of members of Parliament backed the Remain side in the referendum, but could be willing to support the start of exit talks if it's clear that the government won't seek a hard Brexit in which Britain leaves the EU's single market. Pro-EU legislators hope the ruling will force the government to set out its plans for exit negotiations before triggering Article 50, something May has previously ruled out. Financial entrepreneur Gina Miller, a lead claimant in the case, said the lawsuit wasn't an attempt to stop Brexit, just to ensure that Parliament is sovereign. I hope the MPs, members of Parliament, will do their job and debate in a grown-up way, she said. The case is considered the most important constitutional matter in a generation, pitting the rights of Parliament against those of the executive. Nick Barber, Associate Professor of Constitutional Law at Oxford University, said the court had ruled decisively that you can't use executive power to overturn statutory rights.
Stanford Lipsey, who sold a chain of weekly newspapers to investor Warren Buffett in the 1960s, then guided the papers to a Pulitzer Prize in the 1970s before becoming the longtime publisher of the Buffalo News, died November 1 at his home in Rancho Mirage, California. He was 89. His death was confirmed by his wife, Judith Lipsey, who said a specific cause was not determined. Lipsey began his career in his hometown of Omaha, working for a company that published free weekly newspapers. He eventually became owner and publisher of the Sun newspapers before selling the business to Buffett in 1969. It was the first of many newspaper acquisitions for the investor who founded the Omaha-based Berkshire Hathaway holding company. Lipsey stayed on as publisher and became a Berkshire Hathaway vice president. In 1972, he and his small staff at the Sun newspapers, led by managing editor Paul Williams, began to investigate the finances of Boys Town, the well-known institution for homeless and troubled boys near Omaha. Founded in 1917 by Catholic priest Edward Flanagan, Boys Town was featured in a popular 1938 movie starring Spencer Tracy as Flanagan and Mickey Rooney as a hot-headed teen. In subsequent years, Boys Town sent out millions of solicitation letters, usually showing a boy carrying a smaller boy on his back, and the donations rolled in. At Buffett's suggestion, the Sun newspapers requested the charity's financial records from the Internal Revenue Service. Warren and Paul Williams and I would sit down and brainstorm, Lipsey told the Omaha Reader in 2010. Then this thing came along. It actually came along on a tip from Warren. It made for a great story. In March 1972, Lipsey's Sun newspapers challenged the powerful local institution by publishing an 8-page section with a provocative headline, Boys Town, America's Wealthiest City. The special report called Boys Town a money machine with a net worth of $209 million. In 1979, Boys Town had received $18 million in contributions and had total income of more than $25 million, or 4 times more than its annual expenses. The Sun newspaper's story won the Pulitzer Prize for local specialized investigative reporting, the first time a weekly paper had won a Pulitzer for investigative journalism. It prompted immediate reforms. The longtime director resigned, an accounting firm examined the books, and Boys Town went on an ambitious expansion program that included new buildings and medical and humanitarian efforts across the country. Among journalists, the Sun paper's investigation became renowned as one of the first in-depth examinations of how charities spend their money.
We'll turn now to local and legislative news. A new training, simulation, and quarantine center in Omaha will help federal health care workers trained to treat Ebola and other infectious diseases, officials said Thursday. It will also help bolster the nation's health security and preparedness for biosecurity issues, they said. On Thursday, University of Nebraska Medical Center officials announced the name of the new facility, the National Center for Health Security and Biopreparedness. They outlined some details of the project, which will provide training for federal workers and include a 20-bed quarantine unit for observing people exposed to infectious diseases. UNMC announced last week that it had been awarded $19.8 million in federal funds over the next 4 years to develop the new center, which will occupy the ground floor of UNMC's planned $102 million Global Center for Advanced Interprofessional Learning. Dr. Jeffrey Gold, UNMC's chancellor, noted the hard work and dedication that had gone into planning the center and how much still lies ahead. The day doesn't go by when you don't read about infectious agents breaking out in some part of the world, he said. And with current transportation, that problem can be in our neighborhoods, in our homes, and in our schools, literally overnight. The facility should be the epicenter of biosecurity training for Ebola and other infectious diseases, Gold said. The federal government decided this is the place, this is the time, this is the leadership team, he said. Representative Brad Ashford, Democrat Nebraska, said there was never a question from the White House on down whether UNMC could take on this role. He said the new role is not just a one-off, it's a long-term commitment, he said. That says so much about how incredible this institution is, he said. Representative Jeff Fortenberry, Republican Nebraska, said Americans tend to think of national security in terms of the armed forces, but that it goes beyond that. This is a growing field, he said, noting that the award positions UNMC's team to be leaders in America's health care security. Construction on the facility is scheduled to begin this winter at the southeast corner of 42nd and Emily Streets. The technology will be built into the facility. An advanced simulation center was one of the elements the university touted in competing for the federal money. Other selling points in central location, military relationships, and Ebola experience. UNMC's clinical partner, Nebraska Medicine, was among a small number of U.S. hospitals that treated Ebola patients during the 2014-15 outbreak. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services stipulated that only U.S. hospitals that had successfully cared for Ebola patients would be considered eligible for the grant. Dr. Chris Kratoshivo, UNMC Associate Vice Chancellor for Clinical Research, said one of the big benefits for the federal government was being able to leverage all of the resources in IXL, or Interprofessional Experiential Center for Enduring Learning, which is housed in the Global Center. Under the grant, the partners will create training programs for federal personnel, delivering about 20 of them over the next few years. The 20-bed quarantine unit will be divided into 2 separate units, one with 11 beds, the other with 9, designed with negative air pressure to keep any airborne agents from escaping. Annual drills will be held to practice transporting 20 patients to the unit to keep our team ready. In real life, a person who developed an illness would be transferred to the nearby Nebraska biocontainment unit. The quarantine unit will have its own entrance and underneath the building for those under quarantine and their visitors, and an ambulance entrance. The new center also will include an apartment where responders can practice picking up an exposed person for transport in a biocontainment simulation area. The facilities, he said, also will be available for local training. The university will be involved in a large-scale exercise next week with the U.S. State Department. The center can train workers to deal with a number of agents, not just Ebola, he said. Once the first 4 years of the agreement wrap up, Kratochvil said, the federal government will have the option of renewing the contract for quarantine and training for 21 years. Also ongoing is the university's partnership with 2 other hospitals that have treated Ebola patients, Emory University in Atlanta and New York City Health and Hospitals Bellevue through the National Ebola Training and Education Center. Established by HHS, the center's name soon will be changed to reflect a role beyond Ebola.
Local and state level campaigns are flooding the airways with TV advertisements as Election Day approaches. Lincoln area viewers can find ads urging them to retain the legislature's elimination of the death penalty and to vote one way or the other on Southeast Community College's proposed $369 million bond issue. In addition, candidates in 2 area legislative races have spent tens of thousands on network and cable TV ad buys. This would be by far the most spending by legislative candidates in the last 5 or 6 election cycles, said Roger Moody, Vice President and General Manager at KLKN TV. Those candidates were already receiving significant face time through the usual mailers, as well as TV quality videos posted on social media, a trend that emerged in several state-level races this year. The TV ads mostly started in October and have grown increasingly frequent. Federal Communications Commission's filings show Mike Hilgers and Larry Scheer, candidates for Legislative District 21, bought a combined $50,000 worth of network and cable TV ad time in recent weeks. That district covers northwest Lancaster County, including part of Lincoln. Hilger appears to be the top spender among local legislative candidates, buying $36,000 worth of ad time in that race. Jim Gordon and Suzanne Geist have spent thousands of dollars on TV ads in their race for East Lincoln and Lancaster County's District 25. The campaigns have benefited from outside money, too. The Nebraska Republican Party has aired negative ads aimed at Gordon, and the Nebraska State Education Association's political arm has purchased more than $15,000 in time on Channel 8, KLKN, Channel 10 and 11, KOLN and KGIN, and KSNB, and Scheer's campaign. Incumbent Senator Jerry Johnson and Les Sealer, and legislative hopeful Bob Lammers of Kearney. And those 3 candidates have been targeted through TV ads and other media by the conservative group Trees of Liberty. Airtime for legislative races is rare in Omaha, where money floods in from presidential and congressional campaigns, creating competition, said Moody of KLKN. One state-level campaign to crack that market is the effort to retain the repeal of the death penalty. Retain a Just Nebraska also appears to be the big spender statewide. Retain had gobbled up more than $200,000 in TV time across the state through early October, according to campaign filings. And it reserved much more airtime for the campaign's final 2 weeks, including about $50,000 in time on KOLN, KGIN, KLKN, KSNB, and KFXL, all of which serve Lincoln audiences. Also locally, the campaigns on either side of Southeast Community College's proposed $369 million bond issue have made big ticket buys for ads to run during this Saturday's Husker football game against Ohio State and other ads. Friends of Southeast Community College, which aired spots during previous games this fall, has reserved time before, during, and after Saturday's telecast on KLKN, Lincoln's ABC affiliate. The group opposing the bond issue, Vote No 369, has ordered 2 30-second slots during the game. At least one will feature former Governor Dave Heineman. All those TV advertisements represent a relatively new development in an election year in which local and state level candidates have taken greater advantage of social media. TV quality ads for those races have aired on Facebook and Twitter for months. The online platform gives campaign managers better control over who sees their ads and a better sense of the ad's effectiveness, said Brett Comstock, a 21-year-old college student from Auburn whose company has overseen social media strategy for about 10 Nebraska campaigns this year. Comstock's company, BCom Solutions, works mostly with progressive and moderate candidates and hopes to work with as many as 100 political campaigns next election cycle. Video has always been the big advertising platform, always, he said, but I don't know how many people watch TV advertisement as something pleasurable. Online advertising costs less and social video can feel more intimate. People can watch it on their own time and share it with friends. We're creating online conversations that are actually helpful for the candidates, Comstock said.
The Nebraska legislature has a new technology use policy developed after Senator Bill Kintner's cybersex scandal and other incidents. The legislature's executive board on Thursday unanimously approved a policy that, among other things, prohibits senators and their staff from posting information on personal, campaign, and commercial social media websites through the state secure network or state equipment. Omaha Senator Bob Christ, chairman of the executive board, said the incident involving Kintner was the latest to spur the need for technology guidelines, though there have been others. They include the use of a state copy machine to print thousands of campaign-related materials and the use of a senator's office legislative website to advocate for a candidate for office, he said. A hacker linked to child pornography recently attempted to attack the legislature's secure website, Chris said. The attack was caught by legislative IT staff and the State Patrol is investigating. Chris said the policy is meant to protect citizens' investment in state equipment. There isn't a large corporation or small company in this country that isn't dealing with social media issues, and most of them have clear-cut guidelines that you can be fired for on moment's notice, he said, noting that he doesn't want to have a big brother system, though the legislature needed to start someplace. Kintner, a Papillion, engaged in cybersex on his state-issued computer with a woman while in Boston in July 2015. He and the woman conducted a sexually explicit conversation on Skype, which resulted in both engaging in masturbation. Kintner reported the incident to the State Patrol after the woman tried to extort money from him. The Nebraska Accountability and Disclosure Commission in August fined him $1,000 for misusing public resources. Kintner on Thursday declined to comment, saying he hasn't had a chance to review the policy. He has refused calls for his resignation, including from Governor Pete Ricketts. The State Patrol reported on Kintner's incident pointed out that senators have no password policy and are not required to change their passwords. Senators' state-issued computers also don't require access with login credentials. The new policy addresses those concerns by requiring users to take a technology training course and sign a statement acknowledging they've taken the course and read the policy. And starting in January, user passwords will be required and be updated annually. Senators and their staff still can use a senator's official social media accounts to communicate with constituents about state business. For example, they could use a state-issued computer and the state secure network to post about policy to a senator's public Facebook page. Meanwhile, personal use of social media websites must be limited to a personal device and the Capitol's public internet network. Some minimal personal use of state equipment is permitted, including contacting family members about unexpected schedule changes.
A long-awaited report from the National Institute on Prisons Solitary Confinement Practices, released Thursday, found that about 14% of Nebraska inmates are in some type of segregation daily. Half of them are in highly restricted housing. Racial and ethnic minorities are disproportionately in solitary confinement, according to the Vera Institute of Justice study, with more than 50% of Black, Hispanic, and Native American inmates spending at least some time in highly restrictive housing, compared with 39% of white people. Nebraska has one of the most severely crowded prison systems in the United States, operating at almost 160% of capacity in recent years, the Vera researchers said. Many of the problems with living conditions, access to programming and treatment, and overuse of segregation stem from overcrowding. Many state prisoners spent long periods in solitary, especially those in protective custody, administrative confinement, and intensive management, the report said. The common definition of solitary confinement, the Vera report said, is confinement in an isolated cell, alone or with a cellmate, for an average of 22 or more hours per day, with limited human interaction or constructive activity, and in an environment that ensures maximum control. In 2015, with funding from the U.S. Department of Justice, the Vera Institute partnered with the Nebraska Department of Correctional Services to help reduce its use of segregation. Vera conducted a years-long assessment of how Nebraska uses segregation and identified opportunities for change and innovation. During the assessment, the department began instituting dramatic reforms, the researchers said, including new restrictive housing rules in July in response to requirements of a 2015 Nebraska law. The rules aim to ensure segregation is used only as a last resort, in the least restrictive manner and for the least amount of time possible. Restrictive housing should be used to manage risk and not as punishment, said Nebraska Prisons Director Scott Frakes. We will house people in the least restrictive environment that is safe for all, while providing access to mental health treatment and cognitive interventions designed to change behavior and reduce risk. The department says it has ended the use of segregation as a disciplinary sanction for rules violations. But in a recent meeting of the legislature's Department of Correctional Services Special Investigative Committee, Gerald Moreland with the Ombudsman's Office said segregation reform in the prisons has not reduced the number of inmates in segregation. In fact, it may have increased them. The Vera report showed over a 2-year period about 3,168 people who were placed in segregation for disciplinary reasons spent an average of 44 days there over the 2 years. Native Americans had the highest average number of days spent in disciplinary or immediate segregation at 54 days, with Hispanic inmates at 52 days and Black inmates at 46 days. The 5 most common charges used to justify segregation were violations of rules, possessing or receiving unauthorized articles, disobeying an order, being in unauthorized areas, and being disruptive. More than half of all charges that correctional officers filed were ultimately dismissed following a disciplinary hearing, the study showed. The Vera researchers found that prison officials used alternative sanctions less than they could have, and that disciplinary sanction was overused, often for low-level violations. The impetus for Nebraska prison reform was the Nico Jenkins case, researchers said. In 2013, Jenkins, a troubled man with mental illness, a history of self-harm, and significant incarcerations, including solitary confinement, was released directly from a restrictive housing unit into the community, despite his requests for mental health treatment, and transferred to a civil psychiatric facility. Shortly after his release, Jenkins killed 4 people. His actions had a dramatic and lasting impact on the department and the politics of criminal justice in the state, the report said.
The Goodwill Omaha controversy has worked into an Omaha legislative race as one candidate challenges her opponent's oversight of the nonprofit when he served on its board of directors. Joe Brown is facing fellow Democrat Justin Wayne in the District 13 race for the legislature, and Wayne served on the local Goodwill's board as recently as 2013. A year later, Goodwill CEO Frank McGree received total compensation of $933,444, including a $250,000 base salary, a $519,000 retention bonus, $95,000 incentive bonus, and $52,000 in deferred retirement pay to collect later, according to federal tax records detailed in a World Herald investigation. The investigation also found that Goodwill Omaha paid 13 top employees at least $100,000 in 2014. In a mailer funded by her campaign committee, Brown alleges that Justin Wayne helped executives plunder Goodwill. That text sits next to Wayne's picture and under an image of a child's feet with ratty shoes and the big toes exposed. On the flip side, the mailer shows a Goodwill store and a stern-looking woman holding a young child next to the words, "Justin Wayne oversaw the Goodwill disaster." If that's leadership style that my opponent has, then it's something voters need to know, Brown said in an interview. She said the issue is personal for her because her brother has developmental disabilities. That's one of Goodwill's charitable missions, to employ people with disabilities. Although he served a 3-year term on the board, Wayne said he doesn't recall ever approving a contract or the compensation for McGree. Wayne said executive pay came up in one closed session of the Goodwill board in late 2013, and he objected to the pay and asked tough questions about it. Within a few weeks, Wayne said he was off the board after his term was not renewed. Wayne said the mailer is inaccurate and misleading. She has no basis for it, he said. The Goodwill mailer is just a part of a series of charges and countercharges in the race. On October 24, a group called Nebraskans for Transparency spent $1,780 in opposition to Wayne. State records show. Wayne said the group has sent 2 mailings. Nebraskans for Transparency is funded by the Nebraska Association of Trial Attorneys PAC and 4 union and trade groups, state records show. After Wayne sent out a press release Thursday challenging the mailings, Brown and Nebraskans for Transparency, the group responded with a press release criticizing Wayne, who is an attorney. He does not share our views and values, the group said. Brown said she did not know the group's interest in the race. Wayne, in his statement, said the attacks are the same old negative politics that have gone on for years. Throw mud and hope some of it sticks.
The state last week quietly reinstated the medical license of a Lincoln surgeon nearly 2 years after suspending it after he showed up to the hospital impaired. For the next 5 years, Dr. Scott Strasburger will be on probation and subject to drug screening and testing for alcohol before he performs any surgical procedure, according to the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services documents. Strasburger, a former Nebraska football player and team doctor, agreed to a license suspension after he was accused of showing up at the Lincoln Surgery Center on November 26, 2014, in an impaired state and refusing to take a drug test. His license was on track to be reinstated when, on June 2 of 2015, he crashed his Range Rover into a Honda Pilot stopped in traffic on A Street near Cotner Boulevard, then drove away and sideswiped a parked Chevy Suburban, all with his 6-year-old daughter in the back seat. Police found him at home and arrested him. Prosecutors said a test showed he had cocaine in his system. Strasburger, 53, pleaded no contest to DUI with a passenger younger than 16 and leaving the scene of an accident, both misdemeanors, and in February he got a year of probation. At sentencing, Lancaster County Judge Timothy Phillips commended him on his efforts to get treatment after his arrest and ordered him to complete an outpatient program and continue with aftercare. He also ordered him to stay out of bars. Phillips also told Strasburger that when he had a lot of eyes on him, county court, juvenile court, and the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services. In May, he filed an application with HHS to reinstate his medical license. At an August 26 meeting of the Nebraska Board of Medicine and Surgery, Strasburger spoke before board members voted 5-1 in favor of recommending he be reinstated, according to the minutes. Merle Henkenius and Drs. Michael Biddles, Mark Goodman, Judith Scott, and Karen Higgins voted in support of Strasburger's reinstatement. The only opponent was Dr. Carl Smith, the sole vote against. Jeff Howarth and Dr. Todd Stuhl abstained. Recommendations were forwarded to the Division of Public Health, and on October 28, Courtney Phillips, HHS Chief Executive Officer, reinstated Strasburger effective immediately. He will be subject to random fluid screens, must notify facilities where he practices or has credentials of the disciplinary action, and will have to assure they submit semi-annual reports to the department, according to the 5-year probation recommendation.
A recent radio interview by Lincoln Bishop James Conley has caused another stir in the death penalty debate. The Lincoln Diocese on Thursday called on Nebraskans for the death penalty to remove social media advertisements drawn from the interview. In a press release, the diocese said the social media post uses a quote taken out of context and distorts the position of the state's bishops on the death penalty. An official with Nebraskans for the death penalty said it had no plans to remove the post from its Facebook page, noting that the page also includes a 2-minute audio clip with more of Conley's interview. Conley discussed the death penalty referendum during a 12-minute interview last week with Lincoln radio station KLIN, and part of the interview focused on the decision that Catholics will make in Tuesday's election. Conley emphasized the Catholic Church's opposition to the death penalty and the reasons why, and said through our penal system and throughout our prisons, we can protect the common good, protect people without resorting to the death penalty. Asked whether he gets questions from Catholics about the death penalty, Conley said a lot of people have been forced to think deeply about it. He said it's not one of those teachings a Catholic has to accept, like, for example, abortion. Abortion has clearly been defined by the Church as a moral evil, which is never accepted under any circumstances or justification. He then said that there doesn't seem to be a situation that would justify the death penalty. If they thought it through and prayed about it, they can still be a Catholic in good standing and not go along with the bishops on this death penalty issue. Conley declined to comment about the interview Thursday, but in a press release, the diocese spokesman J.D. Flynn elaborated on Conley's comments. Catholics have to follow their consciences on this issue, but we also have to form our consciences according to the Church's teaching. Nebraska's bishops, Pope St. John Paul II, Pope Benedict the 16th, Pope Francis all conclude that we don't need to execute people in order to be safe. Catholics who disagree with those judgments need to make sure they have a very strong reason to do so. The release also said that Conley explained in the radio interview that the Catholic Church allows the death penalty in principle, but in contemporary times, the circumstances where it would be an option are practically non-existent. In an interview, Flynn said, Conley strongly opposes the death penalty and urges voters to retain the legislature's repeal of the death penalty. All 3 of Nebraska's Catholic bishops have spoken out against the death penalty, and a statewide education campaign opposing it was launched by the Nebraska Catholic Conference, which represents the bishop on policy issues.
And we will now turn to death and funeral notices in each of our papers. These from the Lincoln Journal-Star for Friday, November the 3rd. Bowles, Norma J. Bowles, was 86 and lived in Lincoln. She died on November 2. Private graveside services to be held at Wyuka Cemetery on Saturday. The Butheris, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home is handling arrangements. Memorials may be directed to Lori Lauterbach for the benefit of Elms Healthcare Center residents in lieu of flowers. Elsasser, Donna K. Elsasser, was 72 and lived in Lincoln. She died on November 1. The Aspen Aftercare Service is handling arrangements. Services 2 p.m. Saturday, November 4. Greenwood, Barbara Greenwood, died in Steel City, Nebraska on November 2. Mooberry, Ruth June Mooberry, was 96 and lived in Lincoln. Private family memorial service will be held at a later date. Condolences may be left with Butheris, Mazer, and Love Funeral Home. Sheffield, Winfield Scott Sheffield was 82 lived in Lincoln. Celebration of Life will be 2 p.m. Sunday, November 6th at the Eagles Club in Lincoln, Nebraska. The Lincoln Alternative Funeral Care is handling arrangements. Spinar, David Glenn Spinar, died October 27 in Lincoln. Graveside service will be held at 11 a.m. on Monday, November 7 at Lincoln Memorial Cemetery. Donations in David's memory should be given to the Capital Humane Society. And my final notice is for Watson, Harlan K. Waddy Watson was 85 and lived in York. The Met's Mortuary in York is handling services. Memorials may be directed to Adopt a Pet in York or in care of the family.
And just to make sure we don't confuse anyone, it's actually Friday, November 4.
Oh, yeah, time flies.
And from the Omaha World Herald, Alvarez, Laura A. Alvarez, age 55. Funeral service at 2 p.m. at the mortuary of Corisco, Larkin, Staskowitz Funeral Home on F Street. Baxter, Marlene H. Baxter, age 78 of Lincoln. Funeral service Monday, November 7 at 10 a.m. at the First United Methodist Church on North 50th Street in Lincoln. Roper and Sons Funeral Homes on O Street is handling the arrangements. Brett Hauer, Terry A. Beam Brett Hauer, age 52. Funeral service Saturday at 11 a.m. at Corisco Larkin Staskowitz Chapel on F Street. Chisholm, Mary Elizabeth Chisholm, age 68 of McAllen, Texas, formerly of Papillion. A celebration of life will be held on November 5th at the Omaha Firefighters Union Hall at 6005 Grover Street in Omaha from 2 to 5 p.m. Memorials may be sent to her husband, Jim Chisholm. There is no funeral home listed. Cotton, Buddy Cotton, age 65. Funeral service 11 a.m. Tuesday, November 8 at Raider Mortuary on Ames Avenue. Dodd, Joe W. Dodd, age 72. Memorial service 11 a.m. Monday, November 7 at First Christian Church at 6630 Dodge Street. Crosby, Burkett, Swanson Golden Colonial Chapel on Center Street is handling the arrangements. Douglas, Lexa Lynn Douglas, age 19. Services Saturday, 10:30 a.m. at the Bel Air Chapel of Hefe Hoffman DeVort Cutler on Center Street. Memorials will be directed by the family. Gear, Carolyn E. Gear, that's G-I-E-R, age 80. Memorial services Saturday, November 5 at 11 a.m. at Calvary Lutheran Church on North 80th Street. There is no funeral home listed. Gregory, Dorian Don Gregory of Papillion, Nebraska, a veteran, 43 years old. Services will be held at 10 a.m. Saturday, November 5 at the Ocker Chapel. Ocker Funeral Home of Alma is handling the arrangements, and that is where the funeral is. It will be with full military honors. Halleck, Robert J. Bob Halleck, age 36. Funeral service Saturday, 10 a.m. at the Kaler Dolch Mortuary in Papillion. Memorials to be directed by the family. Hanson, Anna Mae Hanson, age 91. Funeral Saturday, November 5 at 10:30 a.m. at St. Paul Lutheran Church on Millard Avenue. Memorials are suggested to Nebraska Humane Society or charity of one's choice. Hefe Hoffman DeVort Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Haggerty, Mary Danahy Haggerty, age 94. Massive Christian burial Monday, 11 a.m. at Holy Name Catholic Church. Hefe Hoffman DeVort Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Hoffman, Kirk Laird Hoffman, age 62. There is no other information listed as far as a funeral date, time, or a funeral home. Johnson, Donald E. Johnson, age 87. There will be a complete notice later. Hefe Hoffman DeVort Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Jurgens, Gary G. Jurgens, age 71, memorial service Saturday at 1 p.m. at the Bellevue Memorial Chapel of Hefe Hoffman DeVort Cutler. Memorials to be directed by the family. Lee, Vera Lee, maiden name Jacobson, age 99, of Fort Calhoun. There will be no services. Raider Mortuary on 108th Street is handling the arrangements. Lindbergh, Ronald Tim Lindbergh, age 81, of Council Bluffs. Funeral Monday, 11 a.m. at St. Paul Lutheran Church in Trainer. Memorials are suggested to the St. Paul Lutheran Cemetery Fund. Cutler O'Neill Meyer Woodring, Bayless Park Chapel in Council Bluffs is handling the arrangements. Marquez, Paul Marquez, age 92, a veteran. Visitation with the family Friday, 5 to 7 p.m. at the mortuary of Corisco Larkin Staskowitz Funeral Home. McGee, Marilyn Joan McGee, age 91, private family services, West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home on Center Street. Niehaus, Carolyn L. Niehaus, age 65, massive Christian burial Saturday, 10 a.m. at St. Gerald Catholic Church on Q Street. Memorials to Open Door Mission or St. Gerald Catholic Church, Hefe Hoffman DeVort Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Ryan, Nathan Shea Ryan, age 26. There was a cremation, Hefe Hoffman DeVort Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Schaefer, Lillian E. Schaefer, age 96. Funeral Mass, 10 a.m. Saturday, November 5 at St. John the Baptist Catholic Church in Fort Calhoun. Memorial suggested to Fort Calhoun Fire and Rescue. Severs Sprick Funeral Home in Fort Calhoun is handling the arrangements. Schmidt, Gladys Lorraine Schmidt, age 94, of Fort Calhoun. Service 10 a.m. Monday, November 7 at Fort Calhoun Presbyterian Church. Memorial suggested to Fort Calhoun Fire and Rescue. Severs Sprick Funeral Home in Fort Calhoun. Smith, Catherine M. Cappy Smith, age 49. Funeral service is November 5 from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. at Mary Our Queen Catholic Church. That's visitation, reception of friends. The Mass of Christian burial is at 11 a.m. at the church. There will be a private interment. In lieu of flowers, memorials to Mary Our Queen Catholic Church, Hefe Hoffman DeVort Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Stonehouse, Karen J. Stonehouse, age 73, of Crescent, Iowa. Mass of Christian burial, 11 a.m. on Saturday at St. Peter's Catholic Church in Council Bluffs. Suggested to Hospice of Southwest Iowa or Wings of Hope. Hoy Kilnoski Funeral Home and Crematory in Council Bluffs. Uitz, Frank L. Uitz, that's U-I-T-T-S, age 68, and a veteran. Graveside service is today at 11:30 a.m. at Mount Hope Cemetery on 7602 Military Avenue. Military honors by American Legion Post 331. In lieu of flowers, memorials to American Cancer Society, Hefe Hoffman DeVort Cutler, Bel Air Chapel. Welchert, Raymond F. Welchert Jr., memorial service 10 a.m. Monday, November 7 at the funeral home of Forest Lawn Funeral Home on Mormon Bridge Road. Memorials to the Fort Calhoun Fire and Rescue Department. And my final listing is Woods, Bernice S. Woods, age 86. Funeral service at 9 a.m. Saturday at the Thomas Funeral Home on North 24th Street.
Listeners, memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible, and they go a long way toward keeping us on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind when memorials are listed as donor's choice or your favorite charity. Donations may be sent to the Radio Talking Book Network. Our address is 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205 in Omaha. The zip code in Omaha, Nebraska is 68152. Thank you for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter. And Bob and I will be back following a short break with editorials, living and entertainment, business and markets, and sports.
And thank you very much for that, Ralph Oracle and Bob Gunning, for reading the first hour from today's Omaha World Herald, the Lincoln Journal-Star. We will be back after a short break, and the first thing we'd like to do now is to present the home delivery meal menu. venue for today is Ann Pelican. Good morning, Ann.
For Friday, November 4th, beef tips with bow tie pasta, garlic parmesan cauliflower, sweet roll with margarine, peanut butter square, and a pint of 1% milk.
And thank you, Ann Pelican, for that. You can hear the home delivery meal menus each and every weekday at about this time on the Radio Talking Book Network. And another thing you can hear on the Radio Talking Book Network is Saturday Night at the Movies. Here is Ann Pelican once again to tell us about this week's special program.
I want to tell you a little bit about the movie that I have chosen for Saturday Night at the Movies this week. This week's presentation will be the original Movie Rock, not the remake.
Yeah, I started saying earlier that I found an article from, I think, a Newsweek or U.S. News, some reputable group that
Please tune in and listen to us.
there's a lot of the guys inside the FBI that are just hate
hate
Hillary. And the guy that they interviewed, that of course are not stating his name, but the guy that they interviewed, one of the FBI agents that came out and said something, said that a lot of the agents consider her to be the Antichrist personified.
Saw that last night. I can't honestly believe it. It must be true. They're definitely trying to sink it.
Crazy.
Sunday morning, actually at 2 a.m., the clocks get turned back from daylight to standard time.
I always get up at 2 a.m. and turn my
Remember
mind.
that?
Yeah.
Remember that you are listening to the Radio Talking Book Network in Nebraska, proudly serving our blind and visually impaired listeners for 42 years now. The Radio Talking Book Network is brought to you with the cooperation of KIOS FM in Omaha and statewide through the facilities of NET Radio and Television. Now, let's return to our readers for the second hour reading from today's Omaha World Herald and the Lincoln Journal-Star. Here once again are our stars, Mel Morocco and Bob Godding.
Thank you, Paul, and welcome back, listeners. We'll start the second half of the program with editorials from our respective papers and an opinion article from the Omaha World Herald entitled Restaurant Fairness, Tax Food Trucks or Kill the Tax. The Omaha City Council has adopted new regulation for food trucks that sell prepared meals in our neighborhoods and parking lots. The city, after negotiating with the Omaha Food Truck Association and other businesses, has set limits on where the trucks can park and how late they can sell food. It has established annual fees for the trucks and laid out neighborhood-specific restrictions on the trucks. Now that the regulations have been wrangled to the ground, it's time to get back to brass tacks. The City Council needs to fix the fundamental flaw in the city's 2.5% restaurant tax. As long as the tax is being levied, food trucks shouldn't get a pass. The answer is clear. The city should either apply its tax on restaurant meals to all prepared meals or rescind the tax entirely. It is inexplicable that the tax does not apply to the more than 75 food trucks registered to sell meals and snacks in Omaha. It's no surprise that a brick and mortar business in the Old Market has sued the city, in part because of the tax issue. Michael Henry, owner of the Michael's Cantina, has challenged whether the city's restaurant tax, as applied, violates the state's constitution. The city council and mayor, Gene Stothard, who opposed the tax as a council member and candidate for mayor, have two options. They should adopt a more uniform application of the tax so it applies to both to brick and mortar restaurants and to food trucks, or ditch the tax. Revoking the tax would mean some painful budget decisions, since it now generates about $30 million a year. But taxing one set of restaurants and excluding another is simply not fair.
And we'll turn to the editorial page of the Journal-Star. And the cartoon on the Journal-Star page shows 8 blanks or 8 empty chairs that look like very nice leather office chairs. And the print is the 9th Supreme Court seat, and it shows a toilet as the 9th seat with GOP written on it and advice and consent being flushed down the toilet. The letters to the editor are extensive today. Lily Larson of Lincoln writes, over the past 4 years, I've been fortunate to serve as a member of the Nebraska State Board of Education representing District 1, basically Lancaster County. With the support of the Nebraska legislature, the State Board of Education has developed a school accountability system called A-Quest, which, with input from educators, parents, and community leaders from across the state for the purpose of evaluating and supporting and improving public schools in Nebraska. The candidate for the state board who is best qualified to continue this work in the updating of policy standards and vocational programs for Nebraska is Patsy Koch-Johns. Having taught 19 years at Lincoln High School and being recognized as Nebraska Teacher of the Year, gives Patsy the experience and firsthand knowledge about schools in Lincoln, the second largest school district in Nebraska, to provide student-focused leadership while moving Nebraska schools forward. Her background will be essential as the State Board reviews and updates the science standards in 2017. Please join me in supporting Patsy Koch-Johns for State Board of Education next Tuesday. Vic Dahlman of Lincoln writes, the reason and necessity for separation of church and state is simple. The supremacy of the Constitution is something we should all agree on, but the supremacy of the Christian Bible is not. We are all Americans, but we are not all Christians. Governments must not elevate one set of beliefs over the rest because theocracy is the most oppressive form of government. For everyone's safety, America must remain a secular nation. To do otherwise is to resort to a tired old argument, namely, you're wrong because your beliefs aren't like mine. When you start promoting your beliefs as the solution to everyone else's problems, you're infringing on their rights. America is only great as long as we keep church and state separate and free of entanglements. We must keep this wall up and strong. Doug Evans of Lincoln writes, there are many reasons to vote for Jim Gordon for state legislature. Here are my top 3. Jim served in Vietnam. When I'm deciding who to vote for, I always give extra points to veterans. They have proven they want to serve by literally putting themselves in the line of fire. Jim served the Make-A-Wish Foundation, including being president at the national level. Then he proved that he cares about children and families in desperate need, making him America's biggest fairy godfather, just the kind of person I want representing Lincoln. Finally, Jim Gordon is arguably the father of Lincoln's Trails Network. He chaired the committee for the bond issue that got our Trails Network started. There, Jim proved that he can work with a diverse group. That group included Republicans and Democrats, beards and Birkenstocks, joggers and walkers, inline skaters, bicyclists, and more views and needs. Jim kept that group working together toward a common goal, which is just what we need a state senator to do. Please vote for Jim. He could be one of the best state senators Lincoln has ever had. Sean Labate of Lincoln writes, as a small business owner, one of my biggest concerns is the legislature being out of touch with the plight of small business owners. We don't have a strong voice in state politics as other groups do. I'm voting for Mike Hilgers because I feel he'll be someone to give us that voice. I've gotten to know Mike personally over the last several years, and I know he is committed to the concerns of the small business owner because he is one. Mike has run a business in Lincoln for 6 years, growing it, worrying about it, and making it thrive. He understands how to balance a budget, make a payroll, and create jobs because he's actually done it. I'll be voting for Mike Hilgers on November 8th because I know he understands how the laws he'll be creating impact small business owners like myself. I strongly encourage you to vote for him as well. And Marlene Cupp of Lincoln writes, I'm voting for Jennifer Brinkman for Lancaster County Commissioner on November 8th. She understands the demands that young families are facing today and will bring a valuable perspective to the county board as the only member with school-age children at home. At the same time, she understands the pressure facing senior citizens living on a fixed income and will prioritize economic development and government's consolidation to provide tax relief. She is the only candidate who has a plan for improving access to healthcare services in the district she would serve. Jennifer has the experience to do the job and will be an excellent advocate for the citizens of Northwest Lincoln and Lancaster County. Some people are born public servants, and Jennifer Brinkman is one of those people. We will be fortunate to have her serve Lancaster County as a member of the Lancaster County Board of Commissioners.
From the Omaha Public Pulse, a letter from Kate High, Lincoln board member of the League of Women Voters of Nebraska. The League of Women Voters of Nebraska believes that recent claims about rigging of U.S. elections are unfounded and irresponsible. Based on our experience, we have great confidence in the integrity of the electoral system in Nebraska. There are many checks and balances within our electoral system that serve to protect it against manipulation. Pre-election testing of voting technology, the use of paper ballots, post-election audits, and trained poll workers represent both parties at each polling station, as well as the transparency of the entire process. Nebraska ranks high in election performance when compared to other states. Election performance includes standards such as turnout, voter registration rates, availability of voter lookup tools, voting wait time and registration, and absentee ballot problem resolution. With full faith and confidence, the League encourages Nebraskans to participate in the democratic process by registering to vote, becoming informed on the issues and candidates, and then voting. Nancy Packard of Lincoln writes, the election for District 33 seat in the legislature is being meddled in. Senator Les Seiler didn't vote the way Governor Pete Ricketts wanted him to, so the governor is working against him. Isn't that government overreach? About 20 years ago, I drove from Hastings to attend my first legislative hearing. Legislative hearings are a prime component of our legislature. Citizens of all ages, backgrounds, and interests come to the Capitol to state their views on proposed bills. Senators listen attentively and respectfully to each speaker, and by the end of the hearing, everyone in the room is well informed. This year, some Republican senators cast uncustomary votes because our governor believes that senators must vote the party line. He is supporting and financing candidates to oppose these senators. Why go through the stress and noise and expense of elections if we want our senators merely to vote the party line? Why not just elect one party or the other to make the laws? The issues addressed by senators are too important for predetermined solutions. Our state senators must be permitted to listen and to think. A vote for Les Seiler will be a vote for thoughtful lawmaking. Norman Denenberg of Omaha writes, I've been practicing law for 67 years in Nebraska and have seen all sides of the criminal justice system. I urge voters to retain Legislative Bill 26268, the law that replaced the death penalty with life in prison. Behind death sentence cases are lawyers, investigators, police officers, witnesses, judges, and juries, all human. At best, they come with bias and different levels of competence. At worst, they can be dishonest. One investigator served time in the Nebraska penitentiary for tampering with evidence. That kind of dishonesty can wrongly convict a suspect. When I served as a prosecutor in the county attorney's office, I led a case against a man who had committed manslaughter, not a capital offense. But the jury convicted him of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to death. The most significant factor of this trial was the utter incompetence of the suspect's attorney. He even missed the deadline to appeal his client's sentence of death. A few days before the planned execution, I appealed to the governor to commute the sentence to life in prison. He agreed, and the man was not executed. I am an eyewitness to this case. There's overwhelming evidence in our country that wealth with access to good counsel, not fairness, affects the outcomes of trials. And let's see if I can pronounce his name. Ozioma N. Oluzium of Omaha says, I am an African-American woman who cares deeply about her community. I want to express my complete support for Jill Brown for Legislative District 13. I take my right to vote very seriously and believe she is the best choice. I am tremendously lucky to have had Brown as a psychology professor, advisor, and mentor at Creighton University. It would be an understatement to say that she shaped my college experience and continues to inspire me as I navigate my post-grad life. Jill embodies what it means to be a strong woman, loving mother, and teacher whose care for her students shows in her work every day. She taught me that I can achieve anything that my male peers can, and it is because of her that I have the confidence to pursue my goals. Jill truly cares about each and every individual in her community, and you can see it in having one simple conversation with her. She has gone out of her way to consistently ensure that I, as a woman of color, feel safe, valued, and understood inside and outside of the classroom. I know that she will be a dedicated member of the state legislature. Please consider voting for Jill this Tuesday. And lastly, from Bill Mahoney of Papillion, I'm relieved the Ricketts family-owned Chicago Cubs won the World Series. If they had lost, I'd expect the family might attempt to buy the rest of the teams in Major League Baseball, just like Governor Pete Ricketts is trying to buy a majority in the legislature.
This is the lead editorial in the Journal-Star, written by the editorial board of the Journal-Star. Count the Journal-Star editorial board among those insufficiently outraged over police use of facial recognition software to join the call for law enforcement to suspend its use for months or years. However, the topic is certainly worthy of public discussion. Guidelines should be developed so the public is aware, for example, of how the photos on their driver's licenses may be used. Some level of privacy protection is advisable. The call for local law enforcement to stop using the software came from ACLU Nebraska following a Georgetown University report called The Perpetual Lineup, which reported on the widespread national use of the software. The report by the university's Center on Privacy and Technology pointed out that the Lincoln Police Department and Nebraska State Patrol were among the agencies using the technological tools. The two agencies use the Department of Motor Vehicles system, which uses it to stop identity theft. Facial recognition software is everywhere. Most people have it on their smartphones. Is anyone really shocked that police are using it to comb through photo databases to catch criminals? As the Georgetown report puts it, the benefits of facial recognition are real. It has been used to catch violent criminals and fugitives. The law enforcement officers who use the technology are men and women of good faith. They do not want to invade our privacy or create a police state. They are simply using every available tool to protect the people they are sworn to serve. Police use of facial recognition is inevitable. This report does not aim to stop it. It's abundantly evident that big data can be put to objectionable uses in both the public and private sector. Facebook was recently taken to task for offering ads that exclude certain groups on the basis of ethnic affinities. Imagine if, during the Jim Crow era, a newspaper offered advertisers the option of placing ads only in copies that went to white subscribers, ProPublica said in its report on the practice. Big data is a tsunami that is altering the structure of society in ways that people are only beginning to comprehend. The Lincoln City Council in 2013 set a policy that allows considerable police latitude in the use of facial recognition software. The policy does not, however, allow police to use it as the sole basis for an arrest. Public Safety Director Tom Cassidy said Lincoln Police submitted 17 photos for a search last year with 4 identifications. It seems excessive and premature to take away police use of facial recognition software, even temporarily. It's clear, however, that big data could be misused to discourage free speech and the right of assembly. Policies that govern its use should be public. Regular reports should be required on how police are using facial recognition software and similar big data tools.
It's time now to turn to the lighter section in our paper with today's living and entertainment and people news. From New York, 8-time Golden Globe winner Meryl Streep will add one more award at the next ceremony, the Cecil B. DeMille Award. The Hollywood Foreign Press Association announced Thursday that Streep will receive its honor for outstanding contributions to the world of entertainment. The actress, 67, has long been a mainstay at the ceremony. She has been nominated 29 times. The 74th Annual Golden Globes will air live on NBC on January 8, with Jimmy Fallon hosting. Nominations will be announced December 12. Ryan Reynolds apparently got in some trouble with his wife, actress Blake Lively, after revealing the gender of their new baby. During an appearance on Conan on Wednesday night, Reynolds confirmed that he is now the father of 2 girls, quipping that there's a lot of estrogen in his house. In an Instagram post, Lively said that Reynolds got himself into huge trouble on Conan and that he offered her milk and cookies to make up for it. The baby was born in September and her name is still not being made to the public. She joins her big sister James, who will be 2 next month. America's Got Talent judge Melanie Brown will soon remind Broadway audiences of what kind of talent she's got when she joins the musical Chicago, playing jailed killer Roxy Hart. Brown, also known as Scary Spice during her time with the 1990s pop group The Spice Girls, starts December 28 at the Ambassador Theater. Brown will be following a wide array of performers who have played the role, including Marilu Henner, Ashley Simpson, and Christy Brinkley. Mariah Carey is getting into full diva mode for the holidays. She's the first act to announce for next month's VH1 Divas Holiday on Silent Night concert special. Carey, whose All I Want for Christmas is one of the most listened to holiday songs of all time, will perform at the event that tapes on December 2 at the King's Theater in Brooklyn, New York. The TV special will air on VH1 on December 5. Miley Kunis writes a new essay that anytime she experiences gender bias at work, she's going to speak up about it. The 33-year-old actress producer says in the essay published on the Medium website Thursday that women have been conditioned to believe that their livelihoods might be threatened if they speak out against sexist behavior. Kunis writes that she is fortunate that I have reached a place that I can stop compromising and stand my ground without fearing how I will put food on my table. She says she hopes that by adding her voice to the conversation, working women feel more empowered and a little less alone. And from Yountville, California, celebrity chef Michael Chiarello has been arrested on suspicion of driving under the influence of alcohol and drug possession. The California Highway Patrol said he was arrested after his Porsche Boxster was stopped around 3:30 a.m. Wednesday on Silverado Trail. The area is a couple miles from Yountville, where he has a restaurant.
And we'll turn to some of the lighter columns in each of our papers. This is Ask Amy, written by Amy Dickinson and appearing in the Journal Star. Dear Amy, I am 40 and have dealt with depression my whole life. Depression runs in my family on the father's side. My father is an alcoholic. He was emotionally, verbally, and physically abusive. He also sexually abused one of my sisters and another female member of my family. He and my mother are still married. I adore my mother, even though she has chosen to stay with him. So being estranged from him means that I have very little contact with my mother, which is heartbreaking. I just know that after she passes, I'm going to hate myself for not making more of an effort to keep in touch with her. I live in that gray world of depression. I hate myself. I have an internal mantra that is basically me telling myself how much I hate myself. The only shining spot in my life is my husband. I love him very much, and he returns that love to me. I am also somewhat dependent on alcohol. I don't binge drink, but I drink to be social and also when I'm alone. It calls to me and I crave it. I have never seen a therapist or counselor. However, I have in the past been on antidepressants. I stopped taking them because I didn't think they helped. We tried several different medicines. I haven't been on antidepressants for more than 10 years. My insurance covers 12 visits a year to a therapist. Would that be worth it? Would 12 visits a year really help me? Signed, In Pain. Dear In Pain, medications have changed over the last 10 years. Please revisit this as a way to medically manage your depression, which could make it easier to deal with your other significant and important issues. Therapy is worth it. Your therapist can help you bridge the gap between appointments by giving you reading materials and exercises to reprogram that tape in your head. A therapist can also suggest non-medical ways for you to cope with your depression. You are obviously extremely self-aware. A therapist can help you to use your self-awareness to gain more insights into ways to feel better. I would highly recommend you attend a group for adult children of alcoholics. Finding fellowship with others who have faced similar childhood challenges could help. Dear Amy, my neighbor has just buried her second husband. The second husband was about 2 weeks gone, and my neighbor didn't know I was in the garage listening to her try to pick up my hubby as he was around the other side of the building. I told him what she was doing. Not that I've ever talked to this woman, but how does one stay comfortable as a neighbor after that? Signed, Perplexed, in Canada. Perhaps if you bothered to speak to this woman, expressing your condolences and getting to know her, you wouldn't feel threatened when she speaks to your husband in the driveway. In addition to you just deciding to be a decent person, the closer you are to your neighbor, the less likely she would be to try to snag your husband to be her husband number 3. Dear Amy, I had to write to thank you for your response to concerned grandma, who was worried that her granddaughters had not been notified that their birth was the result of egg donation. Thank you for stating that the twins' real mother is the mother who is raising, loving, and taking care of them. I'm a grown adoptee, and many times during my early life, people asked me, "Don't you want to find your real mom?" I replied with the same answer you gave the concerned grandma. However, 12 years ago, when I was 56, I needed to relocate my birth mother to discover my health history. After an on-again, off-again relationship, I'm still convinced that my real mother is the woman who raised me and sadly died when I was only 15. Signed, Libby J. Atwater. Dear Libby, I get a little riled when people refer to biological family as somehow more real than the family that raises you. All the same, these girls should be told the truth about their conception.
In Heloise Household Hints, dear Heloise, my husband and I read your column every day, the Advocate paper in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and love your hints. We notice that stores don't update their computers regularly to reflect the correct price. Because of this, my husband uses a price check scanner to verify the prices of items we purchase regularly. If the price on the shelf is lower than the scanned price, I take a picture of the item and the price marked with my phone and show it to the cashier when we check out. It saves the cashiers from having to go check the shelf price and hold everyone up at the checkout. Signed, Ann G. via email. Heloise responds, "This seems like a lot of work, but it is a great hint for moving customers through the grocery line faster." Dear readers, when traveling, here are a few good reasons why you should consider packing small, inflatable children's flotation devices. 1, cover with a pillowcase, blow up, and it can be used as a pillow in flight. 2, can be used to raise children up higher in their seats or chairs. 3, used to support your feet, arms, legs, or on long flights. 4, inflate and use in suitcases to secure souvenirs for transport. 5, used to support electronic devices on a plane's tray table. Just keep them deflated and packed away until you have a need for them. Signed, Heloise. Dear Heloise, here's a hint for reusing tissue paper. I reuse tissue paper from gifts and gift bags by ironing them a few times. Once they don't look nice, I fold them in half and cut a slit right down the middle. Then I pack them away in my suitcase to use when traveling. They make great paper potty covers, which seems to be lacking at many restroom stops. They've come in handy many times during my travels. Signed, Gloria L. in Georgia. Heloise responds, the only hint I'd add is to be sure to discard in the trash. Don't send it down the toilet. Dear Heloise, you know those little plastic containers that pencil lead comes in? Well, it seems like there is not much use for them, but I have one hint for repurposing them. I use those little plastic containers to store my sewing machine needles. I place one size in each little container and then label each with the size of the needle. They are perfect size for these needles. Signed, Francis H. via email. And finally, dear Heloise, when traveling with baby, or dear readers, when traveling with babies, toddlers, and or young children, carry diaper bags is a given. But on trips, consider putting necessities like diapers, wipes, and food, and even toys in a plastic basket on the floorboard in front of the baby carrier. It will be easier to get those items if they were zipped inside a diaper bag. Happy travels, signed Heloise.
And this is John Roseman's column from the Journal-Star. Our 17-year-old daughter is bright, but puts very little effort into her schoolwork. For example, she currently has very low grades in several classes simply because of not turning in assignments. Her only after-school activity is hanging out with her friends, so the problem in our estimation is simply one of setting priorities. We think she needs a job and have made getting one a condition of having access to a car, one of ours, other than to drive to work and back. We have also told her that to have broad driving privileges, she must get her grades up. Her grandfather, who is very involved with our family, has told her that she needs to concentrate on her schoolwork and that she should not get a job. We want to always demonstrate respect for our elders, but think my father's position on this is wrong and undermines our authority. What would you suggest we do? Dr. Roseman answers, I do not like to step into internecine squabbles of this sort, but it's obvious that Grandpa is letting his heart rule his head concerning his grandchild, a common pitfall. Yes, your daughter needs to concentrate on her school responsibilities, but she's made it clear that she has no intention of doing so. Tying driving privileges to her schoolwork is logical, rational, sane, and commonsensical, and I highly recommend you stay the course on that matter. I would also recommend that you confiscate her cell phone. But, and this is the proverbial kicker, my experience in this area causes me to seriously doubt that any consequence or combination of consequences is going to move this situation off square one. In the first place, without making more academic effort than she is currently making, your daughter is going to get around the consequence of having no driving privileges by relying on her friends for transportation. That seems to be sufficient for a good number of today's teens. You can bring her social life to a veritable halt by completely grounding her, but I don't recommend that with this age. The ensuing disruption in the parent-teen relationship isn't worth it. So I reluctantly predict that no consequence is going to result in better grades. Nonetheless, I somewhat paradoxically recommend that you invoke the consequences of no driving privileges and no cell phone. I'm certain that she will be able, in a pinch, to borrow a friend's. Consequences are the way of the world. Therefore, consequences should be employed whether they work or not. You are probably going to have to find her the job in question, or at least find the job opportunities and drive her to the interviews. Do it. She needs to be prepared for entering the workforce or the military after high school. As for her schoolwork, she will bring her grades up when she sees the purpose in doing so, whether she has a job or not. As for Grandpa, respecting one's elders doesn't mean always agreeing with them. Simply tell them that while you always value his opinion, there are times when you feel moved to follow your own intuitions.
On Hulu's new series, Chance, Dr. Eldon Chance, Hugh Laurie is a San Francisco-based forensic neuropsychiatrist, also the father of a teen, and in the midst of a divorce from Christina Diana Farr. A new patient, Jacqueline Blackstone, Gretchen Mull, may be suffering from multiple personality disorder, and her abusive husband, Raymond Paul Adelstein, a homicide detective with the Oakland Police Department, may be to blame. Meanwhile, Chance needs cash fast and meets up with high-end furniture dealer Carl Clark Peters for advice. Carl also has an interesting and dangerous associate named Dee, Ethan Suplee. Now, an important viewer advisory. The first 2 minutes of the opening episode contain gruesome, horrific visuals. While they are not incidental to the theme of the series, they are shocking, be warned. In 1958, Alfred Hitchcock gave the world Vertigo, which is one of the greatest of films, and by chance also the inspiration for Laurie's return in a regular series role since House ended 4 years ago. While his new show is based on Kim Nunn's 2014 novel of the same name, the ghost of Hitchcock haunts every scene. You almost expect to see the director turn up in one of those calling card cameos he was famous for. Homage is what's going on here, and in the event that's not obvious, a phrase or two evoking Bernard Herrmann's famous score from Vertigo occasionally drifts by, notably when Eldon sees Mull's Blackstone in the distance. After all, he's the Jimmy Stewart to her Kim Novak. But Chance and Nunn, who wrote the series along with Alexander Cunningham, have their own compelling ideas. Nunn, an acclaimed writer of what's called surf noir, set his recent novel in San Francisco because the hills reminded him of rolling waves. But built on the most active fault in North America, with perhaps the largest homeless population in the country, the San Francisco of Hulu's Chance is setting character and metaphor all at once. Alluring and beautiful, it's also dangerous and disorienting. Anything can happen here at any moment, and does. Little wonder Chance has lost his footing with his bearings. He's no longer certain of the distinction between right and wrong or reality from fiction. He's open, however, to ideas, even when offered by a huge, treacherous man who goes only by the name of D, and who categorizes people in vampiric terms as either victims or feeders. In pure Hitchcockian terms, Chance is full of menace and mystery. Instead of fog, shadows engulf the city and its inhabitants. Also like Hitchcock, Chance is playing with heads, its characters, and jurors. Dee appears to offer the best viewer guide to this terrific newcomer. The question is not, is it a game? The question is, who sets the rules? Chance is one of the best new fall series, and double bonus points. It stars the great Hugh Laurie and Ethan Suplee, who hijacks his scenes.
And now we'll turn to the business pages. From New York, stocks retreated for an 8th consecutive day on Thursday as nervous investors remain transfixed on the potential outcome of next week's U.S. presidential election, which has become too close to call. The stock market is now on its longest losing streak since the depths of the 2008 financial crisis. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 28.97 points, or 0.2%, to 17,930.67. The Standard & Poor's 500 index lost 9.28 points, or 0.4%, to 2,088.66, and the NASDAQ Composite fell 47.16 points, or 0.9%, to 5,058.41. With 5 days left until the election, Hillary Clinton maintains a lead in national polling in the U.S. presidential race, but Donald Trump has significantly narrowed the gap, particularly in swing states. Investors pointed to polls released in the last 2 days from Florida, New Hampshire, and North Carolina, where the two candidates are either statistically tied or Trump holds a small lead. Investors like certainty, which means they generally favor a Clinton victory, as she is seen as maintaining the status quo. Trump's policies are less clear, and the uncertainty has caused jitters in financial markets. The last time the S&P 500 fell for 8 straight days was early October 2008, the depths of the financial crisis. However, the losses over this period have been modest, nowhere close to the losses racked up in 2008. It's a pretty simple equation. Uncertainty goes up, stock market goes down, said David Kelly, chief global strategist with JP Morgan Funds. And oil for December delivery fell 68 cents a barrel to $44.66 on the New York Mercantile Exchange. So lower gasoline prices continue to be ahead of us.
In business briefs, gamblers can now win or lose money on a video game in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Caesars Entertainment this week began rolling out the country's first skill-based slot machines at its casinos in the gambling resort. Players win or lose based on how many robots they destroy in the Danger Arena game. The machines will usher in a new era of gambling aimed at attracting young people who grew up playing video games. Wells Fargo and Company confirmed Thursday that the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission has joined the growing number of state and federal agencies investigating the company's sham accounts scandal. The SEC, along with the U.S. Justice Department, the offices of state attorneys general, congressional committees, and others have undertaken formal or informal inquiries, investigations, or examinations arising out of certain sales practices of the company, the San Francisco Bank said in a regulatory filing. The productivity of American workers rose in the July-September quarter in the fastest pace in 2 years, and labor costs slowed. Productivity increased at 3.1% in the third quarter, the Labor Department reported Thursday. It was a significant improvement from the previous 3 quarters when productivity had fallen, and the best showing since a 4.2% gain in the third quarter of 2014.
And from Lincoln, Nelnet on Thursday postponed its third quarter earnings release. The Lincoln-based education finance company was supposed to release its earnings after the markets closed on Thursday, but it said in a news release that it was delaying them until after markets close on November 9. Due to recent accounting interpretations related to how borrower defaults should be considered in determining the constant prepayment rate used by the company to accrete its net student loan discount, Nelnet is reviewing the recent information and potential impact on these financials reporting estimates, the company said in a news release. And the percentages of local homeowners in financial difficulty hit all-time lows in August, according to real estate data firm CoreLogic. The foreclosure rate of 0.25% broke the previous record low of 0.26% set in April and May. Compared with August of 2015, the rate was down 0.11 of a percentage point. The Lincoln area's delinquency rate, which measures the number of mortgages at least 90 days past due, was 1.07% in August. That broke the previous record of 1.12% in July. The rate was 1.39% in August 2015. Both the local foreclosure and delinquency rates remained well below the state and national rates in August.
October's confidence rating for Nebraskans perked up somewhat on the consumer side and declined on the business side, a University of Nebraska-Lincoln economist said Thursday. The consumer results, based on 124 responses, rose to 94 last month from 87.9 in September, said Eric Thompson, director of the UNL Bureau of Business Research. There was a significant rebound in consumer confidence in October. It will be interesting to monitor whether consumer confidence continues to improve over the next few months, Thompson said. Still, consumer confidence remained weak overall, and the business outlook was only slightly positive, he said. Results above 100 show strong consumer confidence. A survey of Nebraska businesses showed a neutral outlook for sales. 24% expected increased sales over the next 6 months, while an equal percentage expected sales to decline. The outlook for jobs was slightly positive, with 10% expecting to add to their employment roles over the next 6 months and 7% predicting a reduction.
And we'll turn to sports pages in each of our papers. And from Tampa, Florida, Matt Ryan threw for 344 yards and 4 touchdowns, helping the Atlanta Falcons tighten their grip on first place in the NFC South with a 43-28 victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Thursday night. Julio Jones had 8 receptions for 111 yards and a TD as the Falcons, now 6-3, avenged a season-opening loss to the Bucks, who were now at 3-5. Tampa Bay has dropped 2 straight on the heels of a 3-game winning streak that got them back to 500. Jones, who's closing in on another 1,000 yards receiving season with 970 through 9 games, caught a 3-yard scoring pass in the third quarter when Ryan led TD drives of 86 and 82 yards to break it open. Levine Toilolo, Patrick DeMarco, and Austin Hooper also caught TD passes from Ryan, who leads the NFL with 2,980 yards and 23 touchdowns versus 4 receptions.
In Husker volleyball news, in his first head coaching job at Wisconsin in the 1990s, John Cook didn't have to look far for a model of how he wanted to build his teams. While most of volleyball's power programs were still on the West Coast, Penn State was becoming the game's dominant Eastern force, with Coach Russ Rose putting together teams that focused just as much on preventing points as they did on scoring them. A stuffy block, relentless digging, and aggressive serving became the hallmark of the Penn State teams that Cook faced with the Badgers. It was a formula that stirred something then and still today inside the Husker coach. That's something you can control, Cook said. You can control how well you serve. You can control how well you block for the most part. And then you control your effort on defense. Those are things you can always bring every day. Going into Friday's 7 p.m. match in State College, number 1 Nebraska and number 11 Penn State continue to set the standard for defense in nation's top conference. The Huskers and Nittany Lions are tied to top the Big Ten and ranked in the top 10 nationally in opposing hitting percentage, with each holding foes to .149. In conference matches, the Huskers move into sole possession of first with Big Ten foes hitting .163. Nebraska will come into Friday's match having held 7 of its last 8 opponents to .175 attacking or lower. The Huskers finish on the road trip at Rutgers on 6 p.m. Saturday. Defense is largely about effort and preparation, said junior defensive specialist Sidney Townsend. Last season, Huskers embraced Cook's challenge to be the best passing and defensive team in the nation. It was on display in the postseason as NU never let an opponent hit better than .225 in the NCAA tournament on the way to the national championship. It makes us really focused during practice and really wanting to get it done, Townsend said. Just knowing that every play matters and working on our technique every play instead of taking plays off. But Townsend said the Huskers may head to Rec Hall on Friday without one of their defensive leaders. As of Wednesday, senior libero Justine Wong-Orantes had not gone through a full practice this week after being hit in the head by a hard shot in the Huskers' win over Illinois last Friday. Wong-Orantes sat out Saturday's win over Northwestern and was going through concussion protocol this week. If Wong-Orantes isn't able to play against Penn State, it means a second straight start for sophomore Kenzie Maloney, who did the job against Northwestern. That means more time on the court in defensive and passing situations for Townsend, who has played mostly as a serving specialist this year. The Lincoln Pius X graduate said the Huskers' focus on defense and ball handling in practice ease the transition to having a reconfigured back row. Nebraska's backcourt specialists, which also include Townsend's roommate, Anika Albrecht, are tested in passing and line scrimmages daily. As a team, it's not that much different because we all do everything all the time, so it didn't feel that much different other than Justine wasn't there, Townsend said. We just talked about being really loud and communicating a lot because Justine is really good at that. We wanted to take over that role. The Husker defense will face a major test from a Penn State attack that leads the Big Ten with .304 attack percentage, third in the NCAA. The Nittany Lions offense, orchestrated by Florida transfer Abby Dettering at setter, succeeds not necessarily with deception, but through force. Simone Lee, Penn State's 6'1" junior outside hitter, leads the Big Ten with 4.28 kills per set, which includes a 30-kill performance and a win over Minnesota on October 5. Junior middle blocker Halle Washington is one of the league's most explosive athletes with a Big Ten leading .446 hitting percentage that is 50 points better than anyone else in the conference. It's a challenge Nebraska met successfully twice last year when NU rallied from 2 sets down to upset then #1 Penn State in Rec Hall. The Huskers then swept the Nittany Lions in regular season finale at the Devaney Center, holding them to .126 attacking. Whether Nebraska's block and defense can again rise to the occasion, perhaps missing its All-American libero, will likely determine if NU can extend its road winning streak to 21 matches, and it may test just how deeply Nebraska's defensive prowess is embedded in the team's DNA. We're always training everybody to be in there, so we'll put a little more focus on the passing relationships with Sydney in there, Cook said. They were really smooth the other night. We're always rotating people. They're always working next to each other, so it's a pretty smooth transition.
And from Ames, Iowa, Baker Mayfield threw for 328 yards and 4 touchdowns, and 12th-ranked Oklahoma held off Iowa State 34-24 on Thursday night for its 6th straight victory. D.D. Westbrook caught 7 passes for 131 yards and a score for the Sooners, now 7-2 and 6-0 in the Big 12. They beat the Cyclones, now 1-8 and 0-6 in the Big 12 for the 18th time in a row and the 74th time in 81 meetings. Mayfield threw TD passes to Westbrook and Dimitri Flowers in the final 4:16 of the first half, extending his streak of games with at least 4 touchdown tosses to an FBS high 4 games. Mayfield has 31 scoring passes, good for second nationally, with just 6 interceptions. And Mike Riley said he's aware of the pluses and minuses that come with playing college football games on Fridays. The Nebraska coach also sees an opportunity for the Big Ten and Nebraska to gain more exposure. Riley was asked Thursday about the topic a day after it was revealed that the Big Ten has plans to play 6 games per season on nights typically occupied by high school games. My very first thought, and I guess I'm showing my age, but back in the day when high schools played on Friday, colleges on Saturday, and the pros on Sunday, probably that's pretty good, Riley said. Realistically, in this day, it's absolutely probably a very good move, and it's going to give our conference a chance to give more of our teams exposure everywhere, which our conference has done the best job of any conference in the country doing that. The Big Ten's plan to play more Friday games has received some criticism at the high school level. Riley said he doesn't see any long-term effects. I'm sure the high schools will maintain their followings, Riley said. It's not like it's going to be every Friday night in Lincoln or 6 times a year or anything like that. So it's not going to affect anybody really big time long term. It's very, very natural. It was coming. The Huskers will play 1 Friday night game at Memorial Stadium over the next 3 years if selected by the television networks. That's a likely scenario considering the Huskers' appeal to TV audiences. We believe Friday Husker football games will have a serious impact on such Friday night high school games, both in terms of attendance and support. Nebraska School Activities Association Executive Director Jim Tenopher said in the statement, "Our strong wish would be that such infringements not occur. However, we know and understand that this decision was made in the best interest of the Big Ten Conference and University of Nebraska."
In Husker football notes, Nebraska may have the services of its top tight end when it plays at Ohio State on Saturday night. Senior Sethan Carter practiced all week and took the normal amount of snaps, Coach Mike Riley said Thursday. Carter missed the Indiana, Purdue, and Wisconsin games while recovering from an elbow injury he suffered in the win over Illinois. If trainers on Friday clear Carter to play, he should suit up and take snaps against the Buckeyes. "I just want him to feel real confident," Riley said. "Obviously, if trainers let him play, then it's safe for him to play." Quarterback Tommy Armstrong said Carter's return would relieve the 2 other tight ends, Sam Cotton and Trey Foster, from playing so many snaps. Carter is a better receiver than both as well. "He's big like Sam and Trey, but he's a little faster," Armstrong said. In other injury news, right tackle David Neville ankle didn't practice until Thursday, and at that he practiced with the second unit. Sophomore Cole Conrad would start in place of Neville. If Conrad does, NU will have 3 former or current walk-ons, Conrad, center Dylan Utter, and left guard Sam Hahn, starting against the Big Ten's top overall program. Wideout Brandon Riley has a tight hamstring. Riley expects Riley to travel, but he's questionable. Linebacker Derek Young practiced sparingly this week, but Riley said there's a good chance he plays anyway at Ohio State. At this stage of the year, he pays attention. He gets a few reps today in shorts. Should be all right, Riley said. We have to have another plan ready. Trent Bray has done a nice job of developing pretty good depth there, but Diedrich's a good player. We'd love to have him playing. The first of Ohio State's tributes to former Husker punter Sam Foltz was in place Thursday at Ohio Stadium. A white and red decal that reads SF27 has been affixed to the wall of the tunnel where the Huskers will take the field Saturday for their Big Ten showdown with the Buckeyes. Foltz will also be honored by OSU's Block O Group, the largest student organization at the school, and the official student section of the Buckeyes with a card stunt. The Ohio State Band will also spell out SF and 27 at the conclusion of its halftime performance on Saturday. Armstrong hopes to see the coach who recruited him to Nebraska, Ohio State's quarterbacks coach Tim Beck, at some point Saturday. Beck coached Armstrong for 3 seasons, got fired after the 2014 along with the majority of Bo Pelini's staff, and took a job at OSU. Armstrong said he and Beck text occasionally. I can't throw away a friendship and a bond with a guy who recruited you throughout high school, Armstrong said. I'm looking forward to seeing him. It's a business trip first and foremost, but I'm looking forward to seeing him. Hopefully he gets down there. I think he's going to be in the box, but hopefully he gets down there to say hello after the game or before. When Beck was asked about his best memories from his days in Lincoln, the person asking the question reminded Beck that fans often didn't think expectations were met enough, especially in big games. Beck said there was plenty of good things to reflect on from his time with the staff. Great kids, great coaches, getting an opportunity to be around Coach Tom Osborne, Beck said, just that environment. Really, it is a unique place, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to coach at a place like that. He then was asked if it's harder to build a program in a place like Nebraska that's in the middle of the country and not located in a place like Ohio where there's more talent to choose from. Beck said the move from the Big 12 to the Big 10 took a toll on recruiting, especially in Texas, a state that was a big part of Beck's recruiting responsibilities.
Urban Meyer created a buzz in the Mammoth Hotel ballroom. The Ohio State football coach told those gathered in July for Big Ten Media Day that his off-season reports from Buckeye strength coach Mickey Mariotto regarding the team's progress were glowing. He's not sure he's ever seen a team like this, Meyer said. In other words, Ohio State possesses a truckload of athleticism, a wealth of talent. But boy, these Buckeyes are young. They have 23 freshmen and sophomores on the current 2-deep and only 4 seniors. Only 2 of those seniors are starters. Meanwhile, Nebraska has 17 seniors on its 2-deep, 14 starters. If you're a Husker fan searching for advantages for tangible signs of hope in advance of Saturday night's game at Ohio Stadium, NU's abundant experience is a possible edge. I'd say since being freshmen and redshirts, this team has been through hell and back, Huskers senior tight end Troy Foster said. Mike Rose said it's all the time in the locker room. This team has been through too much to just show up at a place like Wisconsin and not give it our best efforts, a place like Ohio State, and not give them 100% of what we've got. Seniors tend to better recognize the urgency of every game. Younger players can, and sometimes do, say there's always next year. Nebraska veterans seem to recognize the magnitude of Saturday's challenge and all it entails without being overwhelmed. They weren't rattled in the least by Camp Randall Stadium last week. I doubt they'll be rattled by the horseshoe. Mental, emotional, and physical maturity can be critical elements. You wonder if Nebraska players recognize that Ohio State appears vulnerable. Bill Rabinowitz of the Columbus, Ohio Dispatch wrote this week, "It's clear the Buckeyes themselves are still figuring out what kind of team they are. The Nebraska players, particularly the veterans, possess a strong sense of belief. They seem to know their capability. And yes, those can be advantages, especially in what figures to be another close game."
In a quick news brief in soccer, Harvard has suspended its men's soccer team for the remainder of the season because of sexual comments made about members of the women's team. University President Drew Faust said in a statement Thursday night that an investigation into the 2012 team found that their appalling actions were not isolated to 1 year or the actions of a few, but appear to be more widespread across the team and continued through the current season. The decision to cancel a season is serious and consequential and reflects Harvard's view that both the team's behavior and the failure to be forthcoming when initially questioned are completely unacceptable, have no place at Harvard, and run counter to the mutual respect that is core our community, Faust said. A 2012 document uncovered last month by the Harvard Crimson student newspaper rated the attractiveness of recruits on the women's team and included lewd comments about them. Members of the men's team called it their scouting report and circulated online. Athletic Director Robert Scalise said an email to student athletes Thursday announcing that the university was canceling the remainder of the team's season, including postseason play. The men's soccer team is currently in first place in the Ivy League. And it's 12 noon. Time to roll up our papers and make way for other programming. This is Bob Gotting. It's been a pleasure reading for you today, and have a great weekend.
And I'm Ralph Morocco. My pleasure to join you. Look forward to doing it next week.
And thank you, gentlemen.
Man, that's
Thank you, Dr. Morocco. Thank you,
that's good, but it's bad. Like, we're going to cancel your season for being like Trump.
Gentlemen, have a great weekend. Sounds like the weather is going to be
Crazy.
pretty nice indeed, and have an even better next week. That comes from each and every